Most people believe change begins with words, with persuasion, with the right argument delivered at the right moment in the right tone. We are trained to think that if we could just explain ourselves more clearly, if we could just convince others more effectively, transformation would follow. But history and experience tell a quieter truth. The deepest changes rarely begin with speech. They begin with conduct. They begin when someone chooses to live differently, consistently, visibly, without demanding applause or agreement. Transformation is not primarily persuasive. It is demonstrative. Every life is teaching something, whether we intend it or not. Every choice you repeat, every standard you enforce or ignore, every reaction you normalize becomes instruction to the people watching you. And make no mistake, someone is always watching. Your family watches how you handle pressure. Your colleagues watch how you treat those who cannot advance your interests. Your children watch what you do when your words cost you something. Your community watches whether your convictions hold when sacrifice is required. You may not see yourself as a leader, but leadership is not a title. It is influence. And influence flows most powerfully from example. We live in a world saturated with noise. Opinions are cheap. Promises are plentiful. Declarations are easy. But trust has become rare. And trust is not built through eloquence. It is built through alignment. When what you say and how you live point in the same direction, people feel it. They may not articulate it, but they sense coherence. They sense integrity. They sense a kind of quiet authority that does not need to shout. This is the authority that changes cultures. Not because it dominates, but because it steadies. If you want honesty in your organization, begin by refusing to cut corners when it would benefit you. If you want patience in your home, begin by regulating your own reactions when you are tired or disappointed. If you want courage in your community, begin by standing firm when retreat would be safer. The change you hope to see will not arrive because you demand it from others. It will emerge because you make it visible in yourself. This is where many people falter. They want transformation without exposure. They want influence without vulnerability. They want to speak about values without being tested by them. But values that have never cost you anything are merely preferences. They only become convictions when they are embodied under pressure. And pressure reveals what you truly believe, not what you claim to believe. There is a discipline required to live this way. It is the discipline of self-governance. Before you attempt to reform systems, you must first examine habits. Before you seek to correct others, you must first confront your own compromises. This work is slow. It is largely invisible. There are no applause lines for restraint, no trophies for choosing principle over advantage when no one is keeping score. And yet this is the work that builds something enduring. Culture does not shift because of slogans. It shifts because certain behaviors become normal. And what leaders tolerate becomes normal faster than what they promote. If you excuse dishonesty in the name of results, you teach that results matter more than integrity. If you reward aggression without character, you teach that power outranks dignity. If you overlook cruelty because the offender is talented, you teach that people are expendable. These lessons will spread whether you intend them to or not. But the opposite is also true. When you refuse to participate in practices that violate your conscience, even when they are common, you disrupt the pattern. When you treat people with dignity and systems that profit from dehumanization, you create contrast. When you accept personal cost rather than passing it downstream, you change the moral temperature of the room. This is how cultures begin to shift. Not all at once, but one consistent example at a time. Living the change you want to see requires patience, because demonstration works slowly. It does not force immediate compliance. It invites reflection. It allows others to observe outcomes over time. This can be frustrating for those who crave quick wins or visible impact. But transformation that is rushed is often shallow. Transformation that is modeled has roots. There is also risk involved. When you embody your values publicly, you become accountable to them. Hypocrisy becomes visible. Failure becomes costly. You no longer have the protection of abstraction. This is why many prefer to remain commentators rather than participants. It is safer to critique systems than to live differently within them. It is safer to demand change than to become its first example. But safety rarely produces significance. To live the change you want to see is to accept that your life will become a kind of argument. Not an argument made with words, but with choices. People may disagree with your philosophy, but they cannot easily dismiss a life marked by consistency, sacrifice, and quiet strength. Over time, even skeptics begin to ask questions, not because you persuaded them, but because you unsettled their assumptions. This form of leadership does not rely on force. It does not coerce. It does not manipulate. It appeals to conscience rather than fear. It respects the agency of others while challenging them to rise. This is why it endures. Control can produce compliance, but example produces conversion. One shapes behavior temporarily. The other reshapes identity. In your personal life, this principle is equally powerful. If you want deeper relationships, model attentiveness. If you want forgiveness, practice it before you demand it. If you want accountability, invite it into your own life first. You cannot lecture people into maturity. You can only walk toward it and invite them to follow. This is especially true for those entrusted with authority. Authority magnifies example. Every inconsistency is amplified. Every act of restraint is noticed. Leaders often underestimate how closely they are observed, especially in moments they consider insignificant. How you speak about people who are not present, how you handle inconvenience, how you treat those who cannot advance your goals. These moments teach more than any mission statement ever will. The temptation in leadership is to believe that vision alone is sufficient, that if people understand the destination, they will figure out the path. But people do not follow abstract destinations, they follow visible footsteps. They need to see what the values look like when they encounter conflict, fatigue, and failure. They need to know not just what is expected, but what is possible. Living the change also requires humility. You will not embody your ideals perfectly. There will be moments of contradiction. The point is not perfection, but sincerity. When you fail, how you respond becomes part of the demonstration. Do you deny, deflect, or justify? Or do you acknowledge, repair, and recommit? A leader who admits error without collapsing earns more trust than one who pretends flawlessness. This way of living changes you as much as it changes others. When you choose to embody your values, you refine them. You discover which ones are negotiable and which ones are not. You learn the difference between comfort and conviction. You grow more grounded, more deliberate, more resilient. You become less reactive because you are no longer performing for approval. You are living from alignment. Over time, something remarkable happens. Your presence begins to stabilize environments, not because you control them, but because you bring coherence into them. People feel less anxious around someone who is internally governed. Conflicts de-escalate. Conversations deepen. Trust accumulates. This is not charisma, it is integrity at work. The world does not need more arguments about how people should behave. It needs more examples of how to live with dignity under pressure. More people willing to absorb cost rather than inflict it. More leaders who understand that the most powerful form of influence is personal discipline lived publicly over time. If you are waiting for permission to live this way, you will wait forever. Permission is not granted, it is assumed. You begin by choosing the standard you will hold yourself to, regardless of what others do. You begin by refusing to outsource your integrity to circumstances. You begin by living as though your life is already teaching, because it is. You do not need a platform to do this. You do not need followers. You do not need consensus. You need consistency. The quiet courage to live your values when no one is applauding. The patience to let example work at its own pace. The humility to accept that you are both the messenger and the message. When you live the change you want to see, you stop waiting for the world to improve before you act. You become the starting point. And while this may not change everything immediately, it changes something essential. It restores credibility to ideals that have been cheapened by hypocrisy. It gives others permission to believe that integrity is still possible. It proves that leadership does not begin with authority. It begins with alignment. And in a world starved for trust, alignment is revolutionary. If you choose this path, your life will speak, not loudly, not forcefully, but clearly. And over time, clarity changes everything.